Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel in the first place. Today we have a Tokoyami ex-listener. I want to apologize if I do mess up on the pronouns because I'm changing them as I go, and not retyping it. Yeah, sorry I said a lot. Let's just get into it. Your point of view. I came out of the kitchen holding up a bowl filled with apples while nibbling on one. I cut them up for Tokoyami since I know how much he loves them. I smiled to myself as I approached the couch to then notice there was a familiar figure resting upon it. I walked around it and set the bowl on a small stand next to it. I set my hands on my hips slightly and looked at my sleeping boyfriend laying on the couch. He shifted a bit, his hands behind his head and a peaceful expression present. Blushing a bit at this, I laid my knees on the side of him and leaned towards him, taking a fistful of his baggy shirt and pulling my head under it. I grinned to myself and I set my hands on his sides, lightly brushing my fingertips against his body. I felt him shiver underneath me, feeling a jolt and a small gasp emerging from him. Just as he sat up, I hugged him and poked my head out. My excited eyes bore into his wide and vibrant ones. He blushed a bit at how close our faces were. I closed my eyes and smiled as I pressed my head against his chest. I felt him wrap his arms around me. He sighed a bit, but I knew he was smiling. I felt something nuzzle up against my head and stayed there. His beak. I felt myself grow a bit flustered at this. I love you, I mumbled happily, trying to hide my giddiness. I love you too, he replied in a soft tone. I nuzzled into him, inhaling his scent and sighing to myself. We laid there for a while until I remembered the bowl I brought. Fumi, give me a second. Tokoyami's point of view. Fumi, give me a second, I heard them mutter. They lifted up their head as their embrace loosened. I nodded, letting them go. They slipped out under my shirt and got up. I hummed in slight disappointment, missing the quiet embrace we were in. They reached out next to me as I sat down on the couch, stretching a bit. They then sat on my lap unexpectedly. I tensed a bit at their sudden action. They giggled a bit. Sorry, I muttered out a reply. It's okay. I looked down to see they had a bowl of apple slices in it. I felt my mouth water at this. I knew they were looking at me. I gulped a bit and sighed. They stifled a laugh as they lightly held onto one and waved it in front of my face. Here you go. I grabbed onto their waist a bit and opened my beak, taking a bite out of the slice and chewing it in content. Thank you, listener. They smiled in response. They pressed the remaining bit of it against the opening of my beak, making me shrink back a bit. I swallowed the piece I had in my mouth and opened my beak yet again as they placed it in. I felt myself grin a bit, knowing that my partner fed it to me. I looked at their eyes to see their eyes water and a huge blush be scrawled out upon their face. I swallowed the piece as I felt a small bead of sweat go down. I quickly spoke up. Listener, what's the matter? They placed their hand over their mouth and a small squeak came out. They shut their eyes tightly and opened them again, looking me straight in the eye. You grinned! I stared at them blankly and looked away. Yeah? They almost screamed in response. I've never seen you do that! I laid back, their voice ringing in my ears a bit. They covered their mouth again and muttered a small sorry. I sighed and scratched my beak with my other hand and looked at them. It's that surprising? I muttered. Yes! They replied almost immediately. I chuckled a bit at their outburst because of me grinning. I quickly stopped and looked at them. Please, you've seen me do that before, so don't freak out that much by my laugh. They blushed a bit and lowered their hand from their mouth, revealing a smile. I will say, it's the most sexiest thing I've ever heard. I felt my feathers puff up a bit as my blush got deeper in hue. I avert my eyes. They suddenly held up another apple slice in front of me. Just as I was about to eat it, Dark Shadow came out of nowhere and snatched it away. I glared at him, it having a sly expression as it chewed and swallowed it. A gasp emerged from listener as they scolded. Dark Shadow, you could have asked. It shrunk a bit and let out a cry at their loud tone of voice. I sighed as listener freaked out and set the bowl on their lap to pet and comfort it. I felt its gaze on me. I tried to ignore it and push back the slight jealousy stirring within me. Listener looked down at me and scooted over to sit on the couch with Dark Shadow laying in their lap. What's wrong, Tokoyami? I shook my head a bit. Nothing. They hummed out with a light, okay, and kept petting Dark Shadow. My gaze shifted to the bowl as I grabbed a slice and popped it in my mouth. I heard Dark Shadow chirping content by the attention listener was giving it. I should have been already used to it by now, but it always bothers me when it happens. I suddenly felt a hand ruffle my feathers, making me jolt and look immediately at listener. A blush crept out onto my face, and they smiled at me. I felt myself relax at their touch. I looked down to see Dark Shadow eating the remaining slices in the bowl. I sighed in content as their fingers interlaced themselves with my feathers in a soothing rhythm. I closed my eyes and leaned into the couch a bit. Dark Shadow entered me finally, causing my eyes to open a bit. I looked at Listener, who had set a bowl aside and patted their lap. I shook my head, but then they cupped the side of it with their hand and laid my head on their lap. I blushed at this, their fingers interlacing themselves once again in my feathers and petting me. I shivered a bit and let out a light chirp. "Aw," they whispered a bit. I felt a smile tugging at my beak as I closed my eyes and relaxed there. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Sorry, I know it's a bit shorter. Oh, actually, it's not shorter. It's like 7 minutes or so. Either way, I still hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, night, whatever time it is for you. Yeah, goodbye!